This is a smart balance wheel purchased from China. I've had it for a year now. I'm going to tell you how it's gone and some of the modifications I've made to it to make it better. So it weighs about 10 kilos. It says on the box it's got a max speed of 25 kilometers an hour. I have tried to get it up there and it suddenly stopped on me and I ended up falling off it and grazing my hand. But don't let that dissuade you. And here it is. So the first thing I'd recommend doing is cutting this small window here. So the grip tape went over the top of this, and so during the day, this shows the charge of the battery. During the day you couldn't actually see that, and so I cut a little window here in the grip tape, and so now you can see that. Let's turn it on.
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
If you heard that, that's the Bluetooth device is ready to pair. So there's a Bluetooth speaker in it, but it's really bad quality. There is the full charge showing there through that window. These lights going around the edge, they usually come in like a multicolour, and you can actually open it and change that to your desired colour. So just showing how it works here, if you lean forward, it goes in that direction. If you lean back, it goes in that direction. And so what happened when it dropped me when I was trying to test the top speed, if you go really quickly, it just suddenly cuts out. So there it just stopped, and that's when I went flying off. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is the quality of the Bluetooth speaker. It comes up as FLD.
The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
Oh, that's great. Alright, let's pop something on. So I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison with this other speaker here as well. Doesn't get much tinnier than that.
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Alright, let's connect to the other one now. Okay, so you can see not the greatest quality of speaker. So we've got a pneumatic tyre here, this bend in it to fill up. So these usually come on like the kids' balance bikes, or maybe some prams take them as well. I have tried to find a solid tyre, so I don't have to worry about it going flat on me. It has happened, and then you've just got a 10 kilo weight that you need to carry. There's no other way you can limp home on that. Changing the tyre, even having a spare inner tube, it's a lot of time. You've got to take off 18 screws here and pop this off, which I'll show you in a moment, in order to change the tyre. Another modification I've made here is, this was the old style plug. It had this weird shape thing that you had to line up perfectly. I bought a second charger and it didn't have the same head, so I changed all of them just to this plug, which can go in any direction. You don't have to line it up at all. And so I had to change the plug on the other end as well there. I'll explain what happened here. This modification here, usually it comes off like this side with these two sort of casters to stop the board getting scratched. I'll show you the underside of that and let you know what happened there. Okay, here it is, the removal of the 18 screws. So this is what you'd have to do if you want to get inside to make any changes inside or replace the tyre or the inner tube. So these are Phillips head screws. Usually I use like a cordless drill for this bit, the screwdriver attachment. I damaged my board here with the soldering iron. I was being a bit inattentive there. Right, almost there. Okay, now the plate's ready to come off. You've just got to be careful to unplug a couple of wires so you don't pull anything loose here. So this one's the power button here. There's the speaker that unplugs from this board here. And then there's also this charging port for the battery. There we go. So here's what the inside of the Smart Balance wheel looks like. I like to call it a Scienceboard. Runs on pure science. So if you want to replace the tyre or the inner tube, you'll need to use a shifter, a spanner to undo this side and this side. Just be careful because there's the wire that runs to the motor that's inside the wheel that comes in on this side, so you don't want to damage that. So I'm going to turn it on. I'll need to reattach the power button. There we go. So there's no annoying voice this time because the speaker's unplugged. If you don't want to plug the speaker in, you don't have to there. You can just leave that unplugged so it doesn't do that stupid voice. I never use the Bluetooth speaker, but I just kind of like its quaint Chinglish charm that it starts off with this weird voice. Something that I would recommend unplugging is this one here. It's a beeper of some sort. Where is it? Where is the plug? Somewhere around here, but I've left it unplugged. Or maybe I just cut it even. So it beeps when you're going at a high speed, it will beep, and it beeps when it's low on energy, and I just found it really irritating. So I cut this off. You can still see if it's low on battery, these lights here will begin to flash when it gets too low. Reason why I've turned it on now is I'm going to change these light colors. So normally you'll have a rainbow sort of setting. You can change that with this thing here. It's got color, so you can change the color there to solid green, solid blue and red, solid green and blue. Goes through all of them there. Or you can have it on these modes. So what I want is a slow flash of green. And I found green's the safest one because it's the brightest color. Blue and red aren't as bright as the green. There it is there. And so I'll just tweak that. No, I don't want that. I want like a sort of slow flash. It's good you're getting to see all the color modes here. Yeah, so I'm going to go for this slow flash, but just of the one color. Slow flash red, slow flash blue, and there's my slow flash green. So I'll keep it on this one. This button in the middle either changes the speed or the brightness. I'm going to change this to make it blink more rapidly. That's a bit slow. That's a bit fast. Yeah, alright, I like that. I'll leave it at that. So, come out to the shed now to look at the battery of the beast. The website that you buy it off, I got mine off AliExpress. The seller will probably claim something like it can do 35 kilometers an hour and it can do 16 kilometers. With range of electric vehicles, I find it best to halve it if you're buying from somewhere like China, and it's more like 8 kilometers, if not a little bit less. So I wasn't satisfied with the battery capacity of it. It had 16 of these batteries. I'm not sure what brand these are. 18650 batteries. So these are the same things your e-cigs, your laptop batteries, Tesla cars run off. So I wanted to replace these with a high quality brand of cells and also put in more cells to make the capacity a little bit larger. So to do this, I had to buy a little bit of equipment. I already had a soldering iron, but it wasn't hot enough, so I got an 80 watt soldering iron. This is safer for soldering cells. I did look at buying a spot welder, but like even a cheap one's over $1,000. So instead I went for the soldering iron. It might sound strange that buying a hotter soldering iron is going to be safer for the battery cells, but it means the hot soldering iron is in contact less time with the battery, so it's less likely to cause damage to the cells. Already had some solder. I also bought some of this large gauge copper wire, solid wire, to make any links that I need to make. You can also use like flat nickel strips, but you need to make sure it's high quality nickel, like pure stuff, because some of the stuff you buy, it's just nickel plated and it won't do the same job. So up here is what's left of my bike battery for my e-bike. I bought a new battery for it from Dillinger that has like the Panasonic Sanyo 18650 GAs, which are really good quality, high, I think it's 3500 milliamp. And so I had my old bike battery left over, which are these Samsung cells, and so I tore it apart to make a larger battery for the Scienceboard. So before going any further, I should probably say a bit of a disclaimer about how dangerous it is working with 18650. I've heard of third-degree burns of people with these batteries in their pocket. Yeah, if you damage them, they're very volatile and explosive. So the outside here is the negative terminal, the bottom, and it actually goes all the way up the side. So the positive terminal there, all that needs to do is those metal strips, if that was to touch this outer part, if there was no heat shrink here, that would short the battery and potentially cause a very dangerous situation. Completely flat, I think they're safe, but once they've got a charge, that energy can be let loose rapidly if they are shorted, or damaged if you drop something on them. That will also cause them to short. So to prevent that from happening, I bought some of this heat shrink so I can put them in there and heat shrink it with a heat gun. That'll wrap them up and protect those batteries. So I broke the e-bike battery up into pairs of batteries, so they're parallel. Those are both the negative terminals, those are both the positive terminals. And I tried to reuse some of this nickel on there, so I wasn't soldering directly on top of the batteries. I could use some of that metal to get the batteries to connect up to the other parts. And then once the whole thing was set up, all those batteries were stuck together onto the BCU, the battery control unit. I then heat shrank this larger one, so it's all covered up. I would have showed you the process as I was building it, what lies underneath, but I was just so convinced it wasn't going to work that I didn't bother. I just thought I was going to end up with this battery blowing up and that would be the end of it. So if at first you don't succeed, destroy all evidence that you ever tried. So this pack that's been spot welded. For me to cut through the strips, you've got to be really careful here, because if you're using like these sort of pliers, well they're metal, you're potentially going to cause a short there. So what I used to do this was a Dremel with like a cutting disc there to cut that, and then trying to use like a plastic tool like that to separate it. And these batteries were glued together, and so what I was using was this tool to pry them apart. If you're using something that's metal, you're really at risk of just cutting through that heat shrink and shorting it. And as I've been saying a lot before, you're just going to cause a short and a big fire. Okay, so before we look at the battery, I might talk a little bit about similar products, similar single wheel electric skateboards. So there's the one wheel. I haven't had a go on any of these. This is the only one I've had a go on. I've heard of the one wheel, which has got this big fat wheel. It's probably a bit more capable off-road. I'm not sure of its range. I know it's got some LED headlights at the front, so that'd be really good for going in the dark. There's some other Chinese brand ones which typically have a smaller wheel, but there's two of them. So that's a bit more stability. I like having this single thin wheel because I find it's easier to maneuver. It's going to be lighter and easier to maneuver because you've just got this small space. It'd also be more efficient because you've got less friction, less contact with the road. So you're probably going to get more off the same battery. Downside is it's a lot harder to balance, but once you're up and going, you get a bit of speed. It's like a bicycle. It helps you stay up. The other product worth talking about, which is what this is directly copied off, I'm convinced of it, is the hoverboard, which is by a US company. They seem to have patents for something else, and they've made a lot of money off that, so they don't actually need to make their product competitive. I think they've got like an entry-level unit for something like $2,500 US, all the way up to like $3.5 US. Don't quote me on those prices, but it's really expensive. It's an amazing looking product. You'll recognize the difference because it looks basically like this. It's got the Bluetooth speaker and everything, the lights and all the works, but there's a hole here. The wheels are sort of donut shaped thing, and that acts as a handle as well. I mean, it looks awesome, but it's just so expensive. Alright, so let's have a look at this battery now, what I've done here. So it's got an XT60 connector here. Drone enthusiasts will probably recognize that sort of connector, which goes back to here. So the battery originally would have only been one of these 18650 batteries high and about that long. On the bottom here you can see the outline of the battery control unit. So I had to break the nickel spot welds on these nickel strips to get those old batteries off. This appears to be some sort of heat sink that sticks out a couple of millimeters from the board. So when I first set this up, I went, oh, there's enough space for those two batteries, but I didn't take into account the BCU. And so there's been a couple of things that I've had to do to weasel and fit this in. So you can see the red heat shrink of those Samsung batteries that I've stuck together. So now instead of having 16 batteries here in serial, we've now got 32. So I guess that would be, what would that be? When I talk about batteries, it'd be 16S2P. That's 16 batteries in serial, but then there's two parallel, in total 32 there. So to accommodate that heatsink, I've had to cut this piece of metal here out, which is the same size, a little bit larger than that heatsink there. So that can fit into this little bit, which bought me probably about 3 or 4 millimeters. The other thing I had to do on this side, so this is the speaker end, there's these plastic pads that come out where the rubber pads screw in that protect your board when you're putting it down, when you're trying to take off. This protects scratching the board. Hasn't done much here, I've still managed to scratch it some other ways. but these bits stick out is the point. So what I had to do there was I got the Dremel and I cut those off. I cut those off to get me, again, a couple more millimeters, probably about 1/2 millimeter there to make more space for the battery. I then stuck some tape over there, and then I got some of that thermo moldable plastic to plug that up and try and make it sort of weather tight there. So as I said, the battery originally went to there, and so I could use the nickel strips that were all on this battery control unit, but then what I had to do here was extend the battery out. There's this extra 2 batteries here that are, all of these are lying vertical, but then the last 2, they're lying flat because it kind of tapers at the end there. So I had to make sure this bit was thinner than this part here where there is enough room here to accommodate it. So this is where I had to use that thick gauge copper wire to link these up, because the battery control unit ends there, and so I had to get the wire all the way back there. I wish I could cut this open and show you there, but that'd just be a massive work for me to do to fix that all the way back up again. And so now the battery fits and it squeezes in vertically. It's just touching there, but also lengthways here it's also just touching where this handle bit starts there, in between just there and there. It squeezes in. I don't know how I've managed to do it, but it works. Okay, so the 16 screws are back in. Now I'll explain what this is about. So this is like the furniture casters. It's like a sticky rubber that you stick on the bottom so it doesn't scratch the floor. I've had to stick this here because I've grounded off where these pads go, so there's nothing for them to screw into anymore. So I got rid of that, and as a consequence I've had to use this to protect the board. I think it's good because the battery's here, it's sort of vulnerable, so instead of being concentrated on 2 points there, when this is down like that, it's going to be spread across the whole base of the board there, and that's hopefully going to keep that battery safe. Cool, so that's it. That's all the modifications I've made to this board. It'd be great if I ever find a solid tyre, because then I could rely on this thing. Just a piece of glass can make it a very long and painful walk home, having to haul 10 or so kilos. I might weigh this because I have added to the battery there. It's probably not going to weigh 10 kilos anymore. It's probably going to be close to maybe 12 or so. Alright, let's put this board on the weight watchers. 9.6. That's not touching the ground at all, is it? No. Yeah, 9.6 kilos. So hasn't significantly added there. That's an error. It's just saying that it, I'm assuming, is 0% fat. It's another error for how much water content it has. Hopefully none. No bones in there either. That's good to know. And it has a BMI of 3.0. I guess that's healthy for an electric skateboard.